The forest is quiet tonight. Soft light moves gently between the trees, and somewhere in the distance, small creatures settle into the calm of the night. Welcome to Nightfall Stories. Tonight, we follow a quieter path, far from great battles and distant kingdoms, into the deep woods of Middle-earth. Here lives a wandering wizard, one who walks not among kings, but among animals and ancient trees. Radagast the Brown. On this night, the forest rests. The air is still, and even the oldest branches seem to whisper in peace. So find a comfortable position, let your breath slow, and allow this gentle journey to guide you into rest. And if you enjoy these quiet stories, consider subscribing to Nightfall Stories, where more peaceful nights await. Now, let us begin. There were few in Middle-earth who walked as quietly as Radagast. He did not travel the great roads. He did not visit the halls of kings, nor seek the company of those who gathered in cities of stone. His path lay elsewhere, among the trees, the rivers, and the hidden places where the world grew wild and untouched. On a quiet evening, as the light of day softened into gold, Radagast walked alone beneath the wide sky. The land around him was open, yet not empty. Low hills rolled gently into the distance, covered in grass that moved softly in the wind. Small birds called from hidden places, and the scent of earth and growing things filled the air. He walked without haste. His staff rested lightly in his hand, touching the ground with each step in a slow and steady rhythm. His robes, worn and simple, moved gently with the breeze, and his eyes, though often lowered to the path, missed nothing of the life around him. A small creature moved through the grass nearby. Radagast paused. He did not turn quickly. He simply waited. A hedgehog emerged from the edge of the path, its small form cautious but unafraid. It moved slowly, sniffing the air, before continuing on its quiet journey. Radagast watched it for a moment, then nodded slightly, and continued walking. The light began to fade. The sky shifted from gold to deeper shades of blue, and the first stars appeared faintly above the horizon. The air grew cooler, carrying with it the stillness that comes at the edge of night. Ahead, the land changed. The open hills gave way to darker shapes rising in the distance. Trees, a forest, not as bright or open as those of Lothlorien, not as heavy as the depths of Mirkwood, but something in between. Old, quiet, waiting. Radagast slowed as he approached. There was no road leading in, only a narrow path, barely visible, winding gently between the first trees at the forest's edge. The wind softened here. The sounds of the open land faded behind him. The air grew still. Radagast stepped forward. The moment he crossed into the trees, the world changed. The light dimmed, not sharply, but enough to soften the shapes of things. The branches above formed a loose canopy, allowing only fragments of sky to remain visible. The forest was calm, yet not empty. There was life here, quiet, watching, listening. Radagast walked slowly along the narrow path. His steps made little sound. The forest accepted him, not with welcome, not with resistance, simply with quiet awareness. Somewhere above, a bird shifted upon a branch. Farther ahead, something small moved among the roots of a tree. None of it disturbed the calm, The forest breathed in its own rhythm, and Radagast moved within it, as he always had, not as a visitor, but as something that belonged to the wild places of Middle-earth. The deeper he walked, the more the world beyond the trees faded. The sky grew dimmer, the path more uncertain, and the quiet deeper. Yet there was something else, a faint feeling, not yet clear, not yet understood, but present. As though this forest held something more than simple life, something older, something waiting. Radagast did not stop. He continued forward, into the quiet, into the deepening green, into a tale long forgotten by most, but not by the forest itself. The path beneath the trees grew narrower as Radagast walked deeper into the forest. It was no road such as men would build, nor even the soft-trodden ways of elves. It was a living path, shaped by time, by the passing of creatures, and by the quiet will of the forest itself. In places it seemed to vanish entirely, yet somehow it remained. Radagast did not search for it. He followed it as one follows the flow of water, not by sight alone, but by a quiet understanding that cannot easily be named. The trees stood tall around him. Their trunks were old and weathered, marked by long years of growth. Moss clung to their roots, and low branches reached outward like slow-moving hands, shaping the space between them. The air had grown cooler here, still. Even the faint breeze from the open land had not followed him into the deeper wood. Above, the canopy allowed only small fragments of sky to show through. The light was dim, but not dark. Soft, green, filtered through leaves that moved only slightly, as though even the wind passed more carefully in this place. Radagast walked without hurry. From time to time he would pause, not to rest, but to listen. The forest spoke, though not in words. A rustle of leaves where no wind stirred, the soft shift of something moving just beyond sight. The quiet call of a bird hidden among the branches. Each sound was small, but together they formed a pattern, a language of presence, a reminder that the forest was alive in ways deeper than simple movement. Near the roots of a fallen tree, a small gathering of mushrooms grew in a pale circle. Radagast knelt beside them. He did not touch them at first. He simply observed. Their shapes, their color, the way they had formed together in the shadow of the tree. After a moment, he reached out gently, brushing one with the back of his fingers. It bent slightly, then returned to stillness. A quiet life, simple, untroubled. He rose and continued on. The path curved slowly, or perhaps it was the trees that shaped it. In this place, direction was uncertain. The forest did not guide in straight lines. It moved as it wished, and those who walked within it followed that quiet pattern. The deeper Radagast went, the more the outside world faded. There were no distant sounds now, no hint of the open hills, only the forest, the steady presence of it, the quiet rhythm of growth and decay, of life moving unseen. Then he paused. There was a change, not in sound, not in sight, but in feeling, subtle, barely there, yet unmistakable. The forest ahead felt older, not merely in years. The trees stood closer together, their trunks darker, their roots more twisted. The air carried a faint scent, damp earth, old bark, and something deeper, something that had remained undisturbed for a very long time. He stepped forward. The path grew fainter, the light dimmer, and the quiet deeper still. From somewhere far ahead, a sound drifted faintly through the trees. Not loud, not sharp, but present. A low, distant tone, as though the forest itself held something within it, something that had not moved for many years. Radagast listened, then, without haste, continued forward, following the path, following the quiet, into the deeper places where the forest remembered more than it revealed. The deeper wood received Radagast without word or sign, yet not without awareness. The path, faint as it was, continued beneath his feet, though it seemed less a track than a quiet agreement between the traveler and the forest. Roots shifted across it, moss softened its edges, and fallen leaves gathered in gentle layers that made no sound when touched. Here, life moved differently. Not openly, but near. A small bird rested upon a low branch just ahead, its feathers dark against the dim green light. It did not flee as Radagast approached. Instead, it watched, its head tilting slightly, as though measuring something unseen. Radagast paused. He inclined his head just slightly. The bird answered with a soft, brief call. Not alarm, not warning, but acknowledgement, before lifting from the branch and disappearing silently among the higher leaves. The forest seemed to follow its movement, not with motion, but with attention. Radagast continued. The trees here were older, their trunks broader, their bark marked with long patterns shaped by time and quiet endurance. In some places, the wood seemed almost smooth, worn by years of rain and wind. In others, it was deeply ridged, catching the dim light in uneven lines. Between them, the shadows felt softer, not empty, but filled with the quiet presence of things that did not wish to be seen. A low sound drifted through the branches, a whisper, not a voice, not quite wind, but something that moved between the leaves with a slow and steady rhythm. Radagast did not look for its source. He listened. The sound came and went, sometimes near, sometimes far, never constant, as though the forest itself spoke in fragments. He stepped over a fallen log, its surface covered in soft moss that glowed faintly in the dim light. Tiny movements stirred along its length, small creatures passing quietly through their own unseen paths. None disturbed him, none fled. The forest did not fear him, and he did not disturb the forest. A clearing opened briefly ahead, not wide, just enough for the canopy to break and allow a pale hint of sky to be seen above. The light there was faint, but clearer than before. Radagast stepped into it. For a moment, the forest felt different, more open, less hidden. The air carried a slight movement, as though the world beyond the trees still existed, even if only faintly. At the center of the clearing stood a single tree, older than the rest, its trunk wide, its branches reaching outward in slow, patient lines. The bark was dark, marked with deep patterns that seemed almost like writing, though not of any language that could be easily read. Radagast approached. He placed a hand upon the trunk. The wood was cool, still, yet there was something within it, Not movement, not sound, but memory. The tree had stood here for a long time, longer than the path, longer than the quiet changes of the forest around it. Radagast closed his eyes briefly. The whispering sound returned, softer now, closer, as though the leaves above responded to his stillness. Then, slowly, it faded again. He opened his eyes. The clearing remained as it was, calm, unchanged. The berg did not return. The sky above remained pale and distant. After a moment, Radagast stepped back. He did not linger. The forest did not ask him to. He turned, following the faint continuation of the path as it led once more into the deeper trees. Behind him, the clearing closed quietly. Branches shifted, the light dimmed, and the whispering of the forest resumed its slow, patient rhythm. Ahead, the wood grew darker, older, and the quiet began to carry something more than presence, something waiting, not with urgency, not with intent, but with the still patience of things that do not forget. Radagast walked on. The forest deepened once more as Radagast followed the faint path beneath the trees. The air grew heavier, not with weight, but with age. The scent of earth and moss lingered more strongly here, mixed now with something colder, stone long hidden beneath roots and shadow. The path began to change. It was no longer only soil and leaf. Small fragments appeared beneath his steps, broken shapes, edges too straight to be natural. Radagast slowed. He looked down. A stone, half buried beneath moss, worn smooth with time, yet unmistakably shaped by hands long gone. He stepped forward. More fragments lay ahead, pieces of something that had once stood whole. The trees grew closer around this place, their roots winding through the remains as though reclaiming what had been left behind. The forest did not resist these ruins. It had accepted them, quietly, patiently. Radagast moved carefully between the stones. Some rose slightly from the ground, low walls now broken and uneven. Others lay scattered, softened by years of rain, their edges blurred by time and growth. There was no clear structure, only the memory of one, a path once laid with care, now broken into uneven segments. A circle, perhaps, where something had stood, a foundation long emptied. No sound came from this place. Not even the faint whisper of leaves seemed to pass through it. The forest held its breath here. Radagast stepped onto a flat stone, its surface cold beneath his foot. For a moment, he stood still. The air did not move. The silence did not shift. Yet, something lingered. Not present, not alive, but remembered. This place had once known purpose. Hands had shaped it. Voices had filled it. Time had passed through it. And then, it had been left. Radagast lowered himself slowly to one knee beside a broken piece of wall. He placed his hand upon the stone. It was cold, still. Yet beneath that stillness, there was something faint. Not magic as men would name it, not power, but an echo, a trace of what had once been. The forest had not erased it. It had only covered it, wrapped it in root and leaf and silence. From somewhere deep within the trees, a low sound drifted, soft, distant, almost like wind moving through hollow spaces. But there was no wind. Radagast did not look up. He listened. The sound passed through the ruins like a memory, then faded. He remained still for a moment longer, then slowly rose. There was nothing here that needed to be disturbed, nothing that needed to be understood fully. Some things in the world remained as they were, quiet, forgotten, yet not lost entirely. Radagast stepped carefully off the stone. The path continued beyond the ruins, faint, barely there, yet still present, as though it had always led through this place and would continue long after. He walked on. The stones fell behind him. The trees closed in once more. The air shifted. The silence returned to its deeper rhythm. Yet something had changed, not in the forest, but in the feeling that moved through it. The quiet was no longer only still. It held memory now. And somewhere ahead, that memory seemed to deepen, as though what had been forgotten here was not entirely at rest. Beyond the ruins, the forest gathered itself again. The trees of the deep woods stood close around Radagast, their branches weaving a dim canopy overhead where only faint traces of light remained. The path, already uncertain before, had become little more than a quiet suggestion beneath his feet. Yet he did not lose it, or perhaps it did not lose him. The air had changed. There was still the scent of moss and earth, still the calm presence of growing things, but now something else lingered beneath it, a faint sharpness, not strong, not immediate, but present enough to be felt in the breath. Radagast slowed. The forest did not grow louder. It grew quieter, a different kind of quiet, one that did not rest easily. The whispering that had moved among the leaves before was gone. The small movements of creatures had faded. Even the subtle sounds of life had withdrawn, leaving only the deeper silence that seemed to stretch between the trees. Radagast did not stop, but he listened more closely now. The path curved slightly, or seemed to. The trees leaned inward, their trunks dark and tall, their shapes less distinct in the dim light. In some places, the bark seemed almost black, absorbing what little glow remained. The forest felt older here, not in age alone, but in something deeper, as though this place had seen more than the rest and remembered it. A faint sound came, not from ahead, not from behind, but from nowhere that could be easily named. A low tone, soft, almost like the memory of a distant echo. It did not repeat. It did not grow. It simply existed for a moment and then was gone. Radagast paused. He did not turn. He did not search. He simply stood, allowing the forest to remain as it was. The silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It carried something, a presence. Not moving, not watching in the way that eyes might watch, but aware. The path beneath his feet felt colder now, the ground firmer, the roots less tangled, yet more rigid, as though they held tightly to the earth. Radagast took another step, then another. The forest did not change quickly. It never did. But the feeling deepened. A subtle darkness. Not the absence of light, but something layered beneath it. A quiet shadow that did not move, yet seemed to exist within the spaces between the trees. From somewhere far above, a faint shift passed through the branches. Not wind, not movement. Something lighter, and stillness again. Radagast lifted his gaze slightly. The canopy remained thick, the sky beyond unseen. Yet, for a brief moment, it seemed as though the darkness above had depth to it, as though something rested there, unseen, unmoving. He lowered his gaze again. There was no need to follow that thought. The forest offered no answers, only presence. He continued walking. Step, pause, listen. The path remained, though barely. The deeper he went, the more it seemed that the forest itself shaped the way, not guiding, not leading, but allowing passage where it chose. The air grew colder still. A faint sharpness remained, unchanging, not growing, but not fading. The silence held. The subtle darkness endured. And within it, Radagast walked on, calm, unhurried, and undisturbed, as though he understood something that did not need to be spoken. That not all shadows were to be feared, and not all that lingered in the quiet wished to be found. The forest did not grow lighter, yet something within it began to ease. As Radagast continued along the faint path, the subtle darkness that had lingered among the trees did not vanish, but it no longer pressed as it had before. It remained, distant, quiet, as though it had been acknowledged and now allowed to rest. The air softened, the sharpness faded slightly, leaving once more the deeper scent of earth, moss, and growing things. The forest, though still old and shadowed, felt more balanced again, as though whatever had stirred in the unseen places had withdrawn, not gone, but settled. Radagast walked slowly. There was no urgency in his steps. There never had been. Yet now, there was something else, a quiet understanding. The path beneath him became clearer, still narrow, still shaped by time rather than design, but easier to follow. The trees stood as they had before, tall, patient, unmoving. Yet their presence no longer felt heavy. The spaces between them seemed less deep, less distant. The forest was still watching, but no longer weighing. Radagast paused beside a low rise where the ground opened slightly between the roots of several old trees. There, the earth had been disturbed, not recently, but not long forgotten either. Small marks remained, faint, subtle, the kind left by creatures passing through, not in fear, but in quiet purpose. Radagast knelt. He paced his hand lightly upon the ground. The soil was cool, soft, alive. He did not search for signs. He did not measure or follow. He simply remained still, listening. The forest spoke again, not in sound, but in presence. The subtle patterns of movement that passed unseen. The quiet life beneath the surface. The slow balance of growth and decay. And beneath it all, a thread. Faint, yet constant. Something that moved through the forest without disturbing it. Not shadow, not light, but purpose. Radagast's eyes remained lowered. He did not name it. He did not need to. Some things were not meant to be drawn into words. They were simply known, the hidden paths of the world, the quiet movements that shaped what would come, the small changes that, over long years, guided greater things. Radagast rose slowly. The forest did not change, but his place within it felt clear. He was not here to uncover, not to confront, not to disturb. He was here to witness, to move through the quiet places where others did not walk, to remember what the world forgot. He stepped forward once more. The path continued. The trees opened slightly ahead, not enough to reveal the sky, but enough to allow a faint, softer light to pass between the branches. The air felt different there, lighter, not warm, but no longer held in the deeper stillness of the forest behind him. The subtle darkness remained, far behind now, still part of the forest, still present, but no longer near. Radagast did not look back. There was no need. What had been there would remain, as it always had, as it always would. He walked on, quiet, unhurried, and in that moment, the purpose of his wandering was not something to be understood as a task or a goal. It was simply this: to move through the hidden places of Middle-earth and leave them undisturbed. The forest began, slowly and almost without notice, to release its hold. As Radagast walked onward, the trees of the deep wood no longer stood so close together. Their trunks remained tall and ancient, but the spaces between them widened, allowing a faint, quiet light to pass through. It was not yet morning, but the darkness had softened. The path beneath his feet grew clearer, still shaped by time, still gentle and unmarked, but no longer uncertain. The air carried a different feeling now. The cool stillness of the deeper forest had begun to fade, replaced by a softer breath that moved lightly between the trees. It touched the leaves above, setting them into the faintest motion, not enough to be heard clearly, but enough to be felt. Radagast did not pause. He continued with the same slow rhythm that had carried him through the deeper places. Step, breath, stillness. The forest remained quiet, but it no longer held the same depth of silence. Somewhere far off, a bird called, soft, distant, then another. The sounds did not break the calm. They became part of it. The subtle darkness that had lingered before was now far behind, not gone, never gone, but no longer near. The trees ahead thinned further. The canopy above opened slightly, and for the first time since entering the forest, a pale suggestion of sky appeared between the branches. Gray, soft, unbroken. Radagast lifted his gaze, only for a moment, and lowered it again. The path led onward, always onward. The ground beneath him felt warmer now. The scent of the forest shifted once more, less of damp shadow, more of living growth. Moss, leaves, and earth carried a quiet freshness that spoke of morning yet to come. He passed beneath a low branch where small birds rested. They did not fly. They did not startle. They watched quietly as he moved by. The forest did not resist his leaving. It did not follow. It did not close behind him. It simply remained, as it had always been, as it would remain long after. The trees grew lighter, the shadows shallower, the air clearer. And at last, the forest began to open. The path rose gently toward the edge of the wood, where the first true light of the coming day touched the land beyond. Radagast stepped forward, and with that step, the deeper forest lay behind him. The quiet remained, the memory remained, but the weight of it had lifted. He did not turn back. There was no need. The forest held its own stories. It did not require witness. It did not require return. It simply endured. Radagast continued into the soft light of the early morning. The land beyond waited, open, calm, untroubled. And though his path would lead him onward, through many other places both quiet and hidden, something of the forest remained with him, not as burden, not as shadow, but as a quiet understanding that the world was deeper than it seemed, and that some of its oldest stories were not meant to be told, only walked through. And so Radagast walked on, between the quiet places of the world, where trees remember, and silence speaks softly, and where the hidden paths of Middle-earth endure, far from the noise of time, in gentle, endless calm.